2 weeks ago before Bay of Blood, if you remember, I did that whole I almost went blind. I only watch things I care about from now on thing, or that's the way Steve makes it sound anyway. And to prove that I was telling the truth, I've picked something that I've owned on DVD for about 3.5 years now and just never seen. Speaking of Christopher Nolan's feature film debut, Following, and I watched it on Netflix. Its DVD's never left the case. I don't even know why I own it at this point. But it's worth the dollar, and you're going to hear why during this episode. Welcome to Debt to Cinema. I'm Brian Gillis.
And I'm Stephen Maltmanex.
Like most people, we love going to the theater and catching the latest releases. However, it can sadly put a big dent in your wallet.
Fortunately, living in the digital age makes the viewing possibilities endless from the comforts of home.
Many of these films that you can see right from your couch, we're ashamed to say we missed, despite labeling ourselves cinephiles.
So join us as one or both of us cross off a title from our list of shame.
It can be an all-time essential classic,
or an underrated piece of cinema that's worth giving a shot.
Hell, it might just be some trashy film we want the other's opinion on. So sit tight and join us as we pay off our debts, $1 at a time.
Your eyes drift across a crowd of people, and they slowly stop and fix on one person, and all of a sudden that person isn't part of the crowd anymore. They become an individual, just like that. Just became irresistible.
So you followed women?
I followed anybody. I just wanted to see where they went, what they did. It was supposed to just be completely random. You would never follow the same person twice. That was the most important rule. That was the one that I broke first. That's when the trouble started.
Son of a bitch.
What?
You just had to pick a Christopher Nolan movie?
Well, this is his only film that I haven't seen. I was
The
gonna.
one guy who's looked at as a god by almost every person in film school that I know. Like, you just
Well,
had to
put
pick
it
a
this
Nolan
way:
movie,
how
huh?
many of them? Well, this is on Netflix, but how many of them have
Uh-huh.
seen this movie? How many of them
probably
have seen
none.
Insomnia?
Probably half. Maybe a little less.
I mean, I saw Insomnia. I think I've talked to you about this before. I saw that before I even knew who he was. Like, I had no clue, or maybe I did know that he directed Memento, but I was young. Like, it was right when that came out. It was probably like 2001 when I saw it on cable, and it was just like, ooh, let's check this out. Robin Williams is in it, Al Pacino's in it, and it sucks. And maybe that's like a little harsh, and I have to rewatch it. But most people on the internet concur that the original version
Oh,
is
yeah.
much better.
No,
than
definitely.
Americanized.
I mean, because the Americanized version just doesn't. It has the ending that's the very Hollywood ending, but you got to keep in mind at the time that was I think it was like a $50 or $60 million movie, and Nolan was not who he was now. He was still answering to producers. He was still answering to his studio. So it's got good. There's good things about it, but no, it's hardly his best work.
So we're in agreement, though. We've now seen
We've now
everything
seen
he's
Following.
made.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen Doodlebug, but I'm sure I can find that on YouTube. It's only like 3 minutes long. But yeah, like, in terms of contemporary filmmakers, probably one of the finest bodies of work. They're really, I mean, even Insomnia with its flaws, it's still not a bad movie. It's an interesting concept. The fact that, it's in like the winter solstice in Alaska, and it's the opposite of 30 Days a Night, except it's not horror. Just an interesting concept, even if you got in it.
Yeah, no, but also it was one of the first films I think that I saw where I was getting used to seeing Robin Williams as a dramatic actor, so it had that going for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he did a good job. But anyway,
This one.
yeah,
So this was shot for like nothing. I think it was like $6,000.
$6,000.
Yeah.
I'm
and
curious
it
to
took,
hear what you think. Yeah.
I really liked it. Like, I was not necessarily surprised, but I didn't know the story at all. I just knew that it was about someone that follows people, and it is about that to an extent. Like, it's kind of voiceover narration, but the first 6 minutes or so, the protagonist, that is what he's doing. He's just walking around, not necessarily being a peeping Tom, but kind of trailing people to figure out what their day-to-day lives are like and trying to get a grip of them. And as someone who identifies as a writer, it kind of like I do that when I'm people watching. I think it's a little more not necessarily sinister, but not as harmless as most people who do it. Like, I am curious. Like,
Well, I mean, here's the thing. The first thing that came to mind when the movie started, and I don't know if you remember this, but we were both in the same class for FEA 322.
yeah.
With Dave's class. And one of the
Yeah.
assignments was people watching, where we just had to follow 3 people and kind of write down, describe them as a character and just kind of make up a story for them. So,
Was it for that class?
yeah, that was for
Then
that
yeah.
class.
Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
remember that assignment. I did it at a concert. I went with someone on my birthday, and I just like was observing people in the crowd, and like I wrote like a pretty good piece, I thought, but I didn't know I thought that was for someone else's class.
No, it was the same class. But what I found interesting just about the opening is because you're immediately identifying with a voyeur, basically, or a stalker.
Yeah.
And
Well, I mean that's what film is anyway.
I know,
so.
but it's like doing it in your face, but yet finds an interesting way of justifying it. And that he says, when you're at a football match and you just see that one face in the crowd, and suddenly they're not
It
just a
becomes a
random
person.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
it's just kind of like, oh my god, yeah, I do that. And then he also, it's the same thing with when you're just eavesdropping on a conversation. You don't mean to, but there's nothing else you can do, and you just can't help but listen. It's
something we all do. Like my angle on it is when I'm walking around the neighborhood or something, I look in people's houses. And I love it when they're watching TV. Because not only do I get it's not necessarily that personal, but very quick I can tell how much they watch TV based on the size of the screen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm judging them based on what they're watching, and sometimes even they're on their phone. So I mean, obviously you're not like, I don't have binoculars or anything, but just those quick moments, because it's kind of like a big part of people's day-to-day lives, just when you're at home in front of your TV, like what you're doing, what you're watching, and I like those little snapshots.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I don't know why people have this drive, but I mean, yeah, it's the same thing. If I'm walking down the neighborhood and I see a TV, I'm not going to look at it for too long, but
Like you're curious.
I'm always, in the back of my mind, I'm curious. It's like, oh, what are you
Yeah.
watching? And then, you just, it's like also when you're driving, and someone's got like a DVD player in the back, and
Yeah, you
you're
watch the
just kind
movie.
of trying to look. It's like, oh, your kids are watching Phantom Menace or Finding Nemo because, well, of course, but
But yeah, this movie,
anyway, yeah.
everyone's an unknown, and they weren't professional actors. I thought that was like the interesting piece of trivia that I read just before we started recording. This took about a year to film because everyone had jobs and they could only shoot like during daylight hours on weekends.
It really doesn't. You never really feel the budget, do you? Or at least, like, I
No,
think
I
the only
mean-
things that gave it away for me was, there were some audio issues where it just sounded pretty rough, in kind of like a film student way. But
Wait, you checked this out, right?
what do you mean?
From your library?
Yeah,
Did you get the Blu-ray or the DVD?
I had the DVD, so I don't know. Maybe
See,
my mix
I
is
watched it
older.
on in HD on Netflix, which has the 5.1 conversion that the Criterion Collection got. Like it started with the
So they
Criterion
fixed it then?
Collection watermark, so I believe it's probably the same 4K that they have.
Yeah, so then you probably got a better audio mix than I did.
Yeah, my audio sounded really nice. I was listening with my nice headphones, so
Yeah, so how did it look then for you?
it looked pretty good. I mean, the grain was nice. I was kind of bummed that it had the 4:3 ratio.
Well, that's the native ratio, though.
Yeah, well, it makes sense because they're shooting 16.
Yeah, they sh-
But they could have easily done Super 16 and had the gate on and made it look Academy ratio. But whatever, that's not a big deal. But no, I thought it looked really cool. Like as soon as it starts, like the black and white kind of worked into the storyline because it is very much neo noir, and so it kind of helped. At first I was afraid that it might have been a little bit like Aronofsky's Pi. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that's on Netflix right now
No,
too.
it's funny. I
where
think they
it
came
has a
out
similar
the
look to
same
it.
year too. Yeah, they
Probably,
got a similar,
yeah.
kind of a similar feel, although it's
That one's a lot more
Yeah.
personal and psychological.
and just a lot more frenetic and upbeat too. Like this is a trip, but in a completely different way.
I really liked it. Like there were some things that I should assume, like a non-linear narrative. It's kind of what Christopher Nolan was known for initially. It worked really well here, and it wasn't obscure. Like the scenes followed one another. It showed the connection, except one, which was more of like a climactic showdown, I guess you could say. But like surprising, like I didn't really dig the underground club stuff because that seemed very much like a studio or a soundstage. But most of it, like it for the budget they had, like really, really nice.
I think that club was real, or
Maybe, I
because there was one tracking shot where he goes from the outside down the stairs and into the club, and it's just
Speaking of tracking
I like the
shots,
doors of that club.
Yeah, the doors
I don't know why,
with the
it just
portholes
really,
look really cool.
Yeah, it just really gives it an interesting look that
Like almost steampunk.
really helps it feel cinematic. Yeah.
Speaking of tracking, did you mind the handheld camera work?
No, not
Like
at all.
it was it just me, or did it seem like they didn't own a tripod?
No, it was. I think most of it, if not all of it, was handheld. Which I mean, it just shows how cheap it is. But I have a pretty good tolerance of just handheld in general, because I know, like, that might be why, because we've talked about found footage before, and people complain about shaky cam
Hmm.
all the time, but I never really have a problem with it unless I notice the shaking more and that the camera is not focused on anything.
I noticed it a couple times here, sort of towards the beginning, because it starts with the interrogation scene, which is definitely on a tripod, where the person's real still, and then like the first scene out in the real world, it's fairly noticeable. If it's like it's not tracking, it's just stationary, and there's that jitter going on. Um, but not a bad thing, and like we've already said multiple times, like with the budget and how this wasn't professional gig, like it's excusable,
Well, yeah, but
especially
also, I mean,
given. Uh huh.
this was shot by Nolan himself, because his
Yeah,
credit is written, directed, and photographed by.
and yeah, and he
So
also
he,
helped
yeah,
edit.
so he was the one holding the camera, I assume. But there's just something about handheld here in particular that I don't want to say gives it a documentary feel, because that's just such a cliche way of putting it. But there is definitely kind of an in the moment, like, this is happening
Hmm.
now, like, rough quality to it. Like, it doesn't feel
It helps with the
rehearsed. Yeah,
verisimilitude.
yeah, it feels like it's all happening right in front of you, and that works for it to its benefit. It's never I never even thought of it being a problem until you brought it up. But
Pro-
yeah, I mean, I'm fine with handheld.
Probably one of the more interesting things about this movie is its length. Its runtime's like what, 67 minutes or so. It doesn't feel short. Like they got like every ounce of story out of this thing. Like it feels like it's an hour and 30 minutes. Like it really does. Like not that it's long, but it doesn't cut corners. Like it feels like an actualized feature.
Yeah, I mean, it never really ever loses me. This is just to bring it up here, since I think I'm going to bring it up at some point. But I was thinking of Memento, and what did you think of that?
You mean like initial watching, or what
Just
do I
in
think of it
general,
now?
like, in general, what do you think of it?
I haven't seen it in a while. I do know the last time I saw it, I thought it was like kind of overrated. But it's groundbreaking in terms of nonlinear storytelling. Like it kind of gave its real foray into the mainstream.
I felt like it worked better here for me than it did in Memento. Memento,
Well,
I don't like. I mean, and it's partly because of the way that's told, and
yeah, and
the runtime is like 2 hours long, and I do feel Memento, it was interesting, but because it's so long, after a while it began to feel like a gimmick, and then it felt like it was going nowhere. And then you get to that ending, which, as an afterthought, I think it's interesting, but I hated because it felt like it just negated everything that you saw beforehand as an audience member.
well, what's weird about
So,
Memento is that the storytelling mirrors the story. Like you kind of need a nonlinear way of explaining what's going on, or at least not explaining, but kind of showing. Whereas this, it's just it helps service the short script. Like if this was just linear and straightforward, it wouldn't be that interesting. Like it
yeah, you wouldn't
helps. It
really
helps
be
here.
as interested in, like,
Yeah.
figuring out what's going on. And I think yeah, I don't know if you probably didn't do this because you probably just finished watching it, but right when this was done, I actually went back and I started it again because it was so
Really?
short and I had the time to do it. Yeah, and it's nice after you see, like, or we have spoilers here, so I'm just gonna say it, like, the ending, even though it's something that I should see coming, I still felt it because it was just burn after burn after burn, and then you realize just how every single detail of this was so well thought out. And especially just going back and watching it for the second time, like, yeah, it's just the little things that he does
I
that
liked how
it just worked. It worked perfectly. Like, I really I really enjoyed that, if you want to call it a twist. Yeah, I really felt it at the end. It did surprise me.
I like how Cobb disappeared into the crowd as the final shot. It's kind of
Yeah.
the reverse of how the protagonist found him in the first place.
Mhm. It just becomes a face in the crowd.
Yeah, like it's the opposite of what he tells the cop. Like when you find someone, like it's, oh, we lost him. Um, this does a really good job of taking what makes noir fun and not necessarily turning it on its head, but really bring it to the present day. Even though this is like almost 20 years ago now.
I
But
mean, yeah, but really, the thing that makes it feel so unique is probably I want to say it's the non-linear structure, which
Well, I think it's also
I
just
know
the
when you think of it
concept.
though, yeah, it's not exactly new either because there were films, noir films in the 40s. They were told in flashback, and they had different perspectives, and
I mean,
you wait
all
for
of
them to come all
Sunset
together.
Boulevard's flashback. So
Yeah, I mean, well, out of order flashback or different perspective flashback. I mean, this is it kind of it takes like a bunch of different puzzle pieces and they come together.
if
It,
no
it's
one
it's
knew what
like
you were talking about
there's
right now, they'd think you're talking about Memento.
well,
Like that.
because
That's probably
Memento's
like a direct
yeah, but
critique of that movie as well, with the puzzle pieces.
no, but Memento is not that scattered. It's more like, okay, here's this thing that happened. Now we got a little bit of an intermission with Sammy. Now let's jump back 10 minutes before the thing that we just showed you a little bit with Sammy, and then 10 minutes before back with that. Like,
Well,
it's not that scattered. It's just, okay, rewind, play, rewind, play,
this is
rewind,
what
play. This
this
is
is.
like, there's three different, like, it's almost like three different stories because they're taking three different bits of time and playing them in order,
Yeah.
but then throwing in another section of the other one on top of that.
What's weird about this movie is that up until Interstellar, this was Christopher Nolan's only original film.
Inception, dude.
I'm saying, oh yeah, well,
Yeah,
less so in Interstellar too, 'cause
and
that's based
Memento.
on
I mean, that's also
Memento is
even
his
though that's his
brother's short
brother.
story. It's not I'm saying it's not an adaptation. It's not based on someone else's work. It's not a American remake. It's not a superhero blockbuster.
Well, but also Interstellar is his brother.
Sorta, yeah.
That was where the script came from
Yeah,
until
like
he got
he kind
involved.
of, he put his own fingerprints on it. But yeah, it's like Inception in this one, which I don't have a problem with because obviously, I love The Prestige and his Batman film. Speaking of that Batman sticker on the door, it's a
I knew
really
you were gonna
weird
bring that
career
up.
foreshadowing.
It's just accidental.
I don't think it was accidental. Like, I hope it's not accidental. Like, maybe next time he does an interview, someone can ask him about it. Like, you probably just like, is there a
I'm
Batman
pretty
sticker on that
sure.
door? I forgot.
I'm pretty sure that you can find some interview where he brings that up. And he's just like, yeah, who thought it would happen?
Well, that's the thing, though. He doesn't really do interviews. Like, there was
Well,
that
I mean,
one I
but
talked about
also,
on Two Cents, like 2 months ago that he did, I believe, for THR. That was the first one he
yeah,
did
I
in a
read that
long
one.
time, and that's partially because he has that whole "I don't have a cell phone, I don't use the internet" thing.
I
So
mean,
it's
there's
pretty
some
hard to
good,
get a
there's
hang
some
of
good
him.
interviews out there with him, and he's also. It's not like he's not out there at all. There's sometimes he moderates Q&As. Like there's a good one with that he just did with Guillermo del Toro for
Yeah,
Crimson Peak.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you watched that.
I
Well,
didn't
you haven't
watch it,
seen the
but
movie
I
yet. Yeah,
follow
so I wouldn't
Guillermo
watch
del
that.
Toro on Twitter, so he was talking about doing it.
God, but yeah, as far as having that bat sticker there, I thought, other than that fun, oh, hey, it's Nolan, it makes sense, especially in today's day and age, that a writer in his 20s who's unemployed would probably have some sort of Batman memorabilia lying around. Think about it. How many people do you know that are
Talk
like
about how much
aspiring
I
writers that?
have, or what?
Oh no, not just you. I mean, almost everybody. Like, I'm sure you got a Batman shirt or something aside from just having,
Yeah, I have one Batman
yeah.
shirt, and I made it.
Yeah, like everyone has something, so that's a pretty universal thing.
Back
I
then,
mean,
it was a lot less so. This is like what, 97?
98. Batman was big then. You
Yeah,
had
but
the
I mean,
you had the film
for
franchises.
different
You had
reasons.
you had the animated show, which was great
The, sh-
for
the sh-
adults as well.
show was kind of over at that point. It was like the interim between the animated series and Batman Beyond.
I don't know. Maybe Bill or watched it or something. You don't know.
Maybe he bought the place and just had the sticker. Um, I had like one other tidbit on this. I really liked the music.
Oh yeah.
The atmospheric stuff was okay, but the industrial music, like it opens with, or anytime he's following people, like really, really good. And it was made for the movie, and I think that's also why it might have reminded me of Pi a little bit at first, because it has a similar score, but just really frenetic, like kind of matches the mood of living in an open, like big city and following people around.
I mean, it's funny. Like, I got a David Fincher vibe right when it started. Like,
A
it
little
just
bit,
has
yeah.
this sort of kinetic and yet unnerving vibe at the same time. But it really works.
Yeah. I liked almost everything about this movie. I definitely recommend it to people out there. It's on Netflix. It's 67 minutes. I mean, you heard this in the cold open, but I've owned the DVD for about 3 years now, and I really wish I had seen it back then. So I don't know how much I paid for it, but it's definitely worth the dollar. I'm sure I paid closer to like 8.
I think it's an excellent debut. Especially for aspiring filmmakers out there who love Nolan. Like, if you want some sort of inspirational story of how to make a good movie for literally nothing, then this is a really good one, because it's you never really feel that budget. I mean, $6,000, like, that's insanely cheap. Clerks cost way more than that, and that was just
also
in one location.
They count music rights in that number though, like the 32,000. They count the music, I think.
No, but they got music after the fact, though. Like, that soundtrack was added after he made the movie. Like, have you ever seen the original Sundance cut?
I still, like, when I think about that, how did Clerks cost that much money? Because, like you just said, it was like they already had the location. All the actors worked for free. Like, it was just the camera and the lights.
I don't know.
And
they
they
probably
got
checked
those
it
credit
out
cards.
for a longer amount of time. Because I think... I don't know. Maybe Nolan was just a lot more resourceful and economic. That's probably why he's much more successful than Kevin
what
Smith.
I was reading is like they were blocking this for days and days and days and days and days forever because they didn't want to use too much film. So they only did like 1 or 2 takes for most of the stuff.
And that's the way to do it when you're shooting an indie well on film anyway, which is not something that many people can do now because film is way more expensive for aspiring filmmakers unless you know the right people.
I mean, I actually have my foot on top of a Super 16 negative right now.
But how did you get that? Through school, right?
Yeah, through school. I don't know how much they cost. We have like, I think it was
they
2
provided
rolls.
them to you, I think.
Yeah, the way that worked, the class I was in, it was like every student had $100, parenthetical, and you could work together. So you got 100 feet, okay? It was like a foot a dollar, and the more people you worked with, the bigger your quote unquote budget was, so the longer your film could be. So I think we had like 6 people.
Oh yeah, I mean that makes sense. There's people that are trying to shoot their thesis films. Like, I don't know if you've seen that on some people on Facebook. Yeah, they started Kickstarters just so that they could do that.
Yeah,
I've given money to a couple because like $10. It's like, yeah, why not? And then throw me a copy because. That's awesome. Like, you should be able to do that. But
the cookie crumbles. Do we have an episode for next week?
One more thing.
You were saying Witness, right?
One more thing I want to bring up, and I just found this funny. The character name of Cobb.
Yeah, he's in Inception.
Just for fun, let's just pretend that this is set in the same world. And
it's the same Cobb.
Yeah, it could be the same Cobb, or it could be his brother, because I think his name is Alex Cobb.
I don't know. For all we know, Cobb's not even... Cobb's
them,
obviously an alias in this film, because the way that character kind of disappears, or appears anyway.
Either way, just the connection is kind of fun, because there's 2 Cobbs in a Christopher Nolan.
That's what happens when you write your own stuff, I guess.
He's the only guy that's ever put characters named Cobb in movies.
I doubt it. I'm sure there's another one out there. I mean, someone named Cobb got a salad named after themselves, so...
name it.
Well, thanks for listening, guys. I hope it's been a pleasure. If you enjoyed it, you can find updates and when episodes go live on Facebook and Twitter at Dollar Reviews. You can follow me personally on Twitter at Brian Gillis, that's BryonGillis, and also under the same name on the lovely site Letterboxd, which acts as my film diary, where I rate the films I watch on an almost daily basis, write the occasional review, and even sometimes compile lists.
You can also find me on Twitter at S_MTX, and also follow my film diary at letterboxd.com. My username is also S_MTX. There I log everything I watch and sometimes write brief reviews.
If you'd like to contribute some talking points, maybe send us a film or 2 that you'd like for us to review, or just some feedback of any sort, you can do so by sending us an email to dollar.review@gmail.com.
And if you want to hear more of us, you can find our entire archive at dollarreviewspodcast.wordpress.com. We're also on iTunes, where you can download episodes and listen to us anywhere, and you can also hear us on SoundCloud and TuneIn Radio just by searching Dollar Reviews.
Until next time, keep the change.